Good morning, all. Today we are going to have a lecture on perfect competition, and I think many of you are aware of what is perfect competition is altogether. However, perfect competition is a part of our understanding in the very beginning, especially from the undergraduate programs or even below the intermediate case. So, however, the point in the lecture today we are going to address is largely how the competitive environment is being set and how it is being understood. So, for that, first of all, initially we need to have really the conditions of perfect competitions, being largely known as the characteristics of perfect competition. One among that is the large number of buyers and sellers, then the second one is homogeneous product, and then perfect knowledge and free entry and exit. And along with that, there are economists who also try to characterize perfect competition with no government intervention. So if once you have all these five characteristics, then you can say that the economy is basically in perfect competition. Now, perfect competition is in that sense by the very definition or meaning of its word imply that it is a competitive condition where everybody, in fact, if you follow strictly through the conditions, everybody knows everyone else strategy as well as their kind of moves or information price, etc. So everything is known, that the relevant information is known to everyone, so nobody can bluff on the relevant information in that sense. So this is what is actually the key setting of a perfect competition. This market condition is inevitable because to understand that how far the real economy or real market conditions are away from this ideal situation. Therefore, this is in fact to be seen as a benchmark to have an equilibrium or whatever, the market stability. Therefore, the importance of the perfect competition is non-trivial, but at the same time, we also need to really look into the aspect that whether this is in fact follows any sort of a competitive environment at all. So I'll come to that point later in a step-by-step formulation. So the key implication as far as the perfect competitive environment is concerned is that the platforms demand determined by market equilibrium price. That is, the curve is actually flat in that sense. Say, a horizontal maybe demand curve, and then the market participants are price takers without any market power to influence prices. So that is because an MR is equal to P is equal to MC condition is always been applied here. Why? Because the very important yardstick of the perfectly competitive market situation is you have a large number of mm, buyer and seller. So there is no buyer who is going to really control the market power. Oh, that is the most important, and the first assumption one has to follow when I speak about perfect competition. You speak about perfect competition. So the dearth of the buyer or the question of remaining the product in the market is never arises as far as this particular things are concerned. So that is also said that there is an infinite amount of commodity being demanded in the market, because the market demand is not constrained at all due to price or the quantity concern, because there are so many producer being or going to produce the same commodity in that sense. So it is perfectly determined in that sense. So there is no constraint of demand in that sense, and also there is no constraint of supply either, because there are large number of sellers in that market. So the product itself is being characterized as a homogeneous and identical product or homogeneous product. So if I am saying that labor itself, so labor has been defined in certain fashion. That fashion has to be followed in every labor which has been supplied in the market. So this is actually says that the one kind of labor means that kind of labor is plenty. Now, perfect knowledge since the plenty of labor is available as well as large number of buyers. Nobody can influence the things as well as I know that what you know and you know that what I know. Close of Oman is also being followed because of a perfect knowledge or the symmetry of information, etc. So the relevant information is known to everyone means there is a symmetry of information between buyers and sellers or crisscross. So that portion is also been clear as far as this particular market is concerned. And the final one is if this is clear, then why should there is an intervention in that sense of third party intervention? So this is also call out from this particular condition, and in short run firm can earn profit and loss or shut down. So, what does it mean if the profit loss and all is the difference between MC is equal to MR? So, oh sorry, difference between the revenue and cost. So, in this case, the marginal revenue and marginal cost is equal, which is equal to price, imply that there is no possibility of any firm getting profit in that sense. Now, since it has been a perfectly competitive condition, normally in the textbooks people used to give an AR curve or an MR curve which is false in the initial, and at the same time there is a possibility of utilizing the firm's economies of scale in the beginning, and it's all basically rubbish. It never exists because in the very beginning itself, when the firm produces an a priori based on an a priori price P, because the firm cannot in fact influence the price or reduce or increase the price in the market. This is the basic setting in the market. If that is the case, with the very beginning, a firm can produce or enter in the market if and only if their MC is equal to MR. That means if their AAC is equal to AR is also, because in the short run they will make profit only if you are allowing that there is an information asymmetry between the firms, or there is an advantage towards that particular firm. But that is only possible if there is an information asymmetry, or say that the real allocation, then you refrain from the assumption that homogeneous product which is or the labor whatever which you are going to im- apply for the produce of the same commodity in that sense. But same commodity production requires same level of techniques, etc. So that is also a kind of a blurred issue as far as this particular setting is concerned. So any any refraining from of this particular condition makes this competitive environment a very different environment. It is then no longer you can call it as a perfect competition. So therefore you have to stick with the assumption as well as the then you see that whether the assumption clearly gives you a particular kind of an result. So that is in fact gives you a kind of cogency in your conceptual or theoretical setting in that sense. So in the long run, profit or normal profit is zero, but it is also equally to say that the run is not irrelevant as far as perfect competition. The long run, short run, all the factors change, certain factors, these are all irrelevant as far as the perfect competitive environment is concerned. But anyway, in many textbook it is also given that some factor changes, some factor don't changes. You have so these runs in fact in that sense technically is nothing to do with the perfect competitive environment, because perfect competitive environment is having no time frame or run at all. So in the theoretical sense, you cannot simply say that you have a long run or short run. All that is actually trying to inject newer ideas inside the theoretical framework of the things which never coherent or conducive towards this kind of an injection. So once you inject, you will, change the whole setup or the environment of the perfect competition into a new set of environmental competitive conditions. So therefore this is basically not what we are talking about. So that will also create this kind of question, unrealistic, why should we learn, etc. Because of this injection, as in the beginning I said. So it is also very important to know that perfect competition's existence, because if that is the case, then you can say how distant is our own market, or kind of the setting of the market functioning, or the competitive conditions. So that is why it is very important. Many small business are price takers, but these are all called the monopolistic competition. But I am not going to the details of it. Anyway, in textbooks are all given this kind of an analogy, or kind of examples to say that there is price taker decision rules for such firms are similar to those of perfectly competitive market. These are called the monopolistic competition. In other words, of the Edward Chamberlain's setup. But that is why I don't want to go to the details of it, which is we anyway going to discuss in the other lecture. So, as in the beginning I said, it is going to be the benchmark of understanding all kinds of a competitive environment, where possible price of this particular market is the minimum in that sense. So if that is the case, so interaction of individuals can actually take over the whole activity, and there is no point of government and monopolies, etc. So these are called different settings which we are trying to introduce inside the theoretical framework of perfect competition. So if that is the case, then the importance of product differentiation and other advantages never exist under this particular situation. So what is actually the curve looks like? It's a simple way to understand this is the following: like you have a demand which is a large number market demand for a large number of firms. So there is no actually downward sloping of this particular thing, because this is all in that sense is completely a misnomer as far as this particular setting is concerned, because in the very understanding one can say that once you have an information symmetry, that is what is actually my utility, what is the price of the market in the which is a priori given, and I have no say on determining, or say in determining price of the commodity, then I even don't know what is my utility level, because I know that that is a price, whether that is affordable to me or not is my concern. If that is the case, then I'll buy the commodity in the market, otherwise I'm not actually part of the market at all. So once you have all this clear setting is there, then why often people make mistakes and keep writing the textbook based on that? And maybe because of trying to oversimplify and give details to the students to understand. It is in fact creates a backlash, that is a reverse effect, that the students get confused because of this thing. You say one thing and you try to give an example of the other thing. So if that is the case, why I said all this thing? Because of this following reason, that there is this downward sloping supply curve and the upward sloping supply curve, and the downward sloping demand curve is all myth as far as the perfect competition is concerned, because it is not make it never makes any sense as far as the perfect competition, because the price of the commodity is given in the market. Therefore the downward sloping of the demand curve is, maybe you are out of your utilities, then that is not market utility, that is for an individual's utility thing, which is not actually true as far as this market setting is concerned. Maybe an individual have diminishing marginal utility, but that doesn't count as far as this market is concerned, because in this case those who want to buy the thing and they cannot influence the price, therefore even that kind of a logic is not going to apply in this case, because if it is diminishing marginal utility and price is given, then the person cannot actually buy the commodity in that sense. Uh, so if it is actually a higher utility and also he is used to get the same price, same utility, maybe it's utility, but that is not market demand at all. It's going to be determined in that fashion. So complete misnomers are always been involved when people try to demonstrate. Therefore, what I would like to say that in this case there are many buyers that the buyers may be having homogeneous characteristics, or they may be having different interests, but the point is that the commodity price is the same for everyone. So you buy the things, your utilities a different cup of tea altogether as far as the market demand is concerned. So you use for X reason or Y reason doesn't matter, but you whether you are affordable to buy the commodity, then you are inside the market, or otherwise you are outside the market. So the demand functions therefore is also a parallel one instead of a downward sloping, which is actually upsets many economists in that sense. But nonetheless, in the perfect competition, there is no such things like a downward sloping demand curve or up and upward sloping supply. Why there is no upward sloping? A firm cannot actually expect that they will have different returns under the perfect competitive environment. Why? Because they can only have one return because the price is given earlier. So if they are having a higher edge in that sense, then many firms cannot have. Then that means they are concealing information in that sense, which is a violation of the perfect competitive environment or the condition of a perfect competition. So that is also not possible as far as the perfect competition settings are concerned. So even in the supply side or also you have a horizontal thing, that is actually perfectly fits with the assumption which we try to make figure out, because in that sense what actually large number of sellers are there, so they come inside the market and do sell the commodity in the market. So and if they don't find that actually it's profitable, they are equally free to go out of the market. And again, this is actually involves no cost as far as this particular setting is concerned, because you produce so long as your MC is equal to MR. So then why you get upset inside the market? So it is in that sense makes a complete idealistic setup. So injecting imperfection inside the setup is actually makes the situation even worse. So your total revenue in that sense is actually proportionate to the total cost, which is actually a straight line. Suppose if this is actually a 45-degree line, then what is the problem? Because the marginal, the the average revenue is going to be a parallel one, that is a straight line in that sense. So this is perfectly fits in that sense. D is equal to P, which is equal to AR is equal to MR. It is nothing to do with in that sense as a downward or an upward sloping demand curve either. So that kind of a situation is actually completely nonsense in that sense. So when you have a given P and when you have a MR and AR, so your equilibrium is actually not fixed one, because this market condition cannot have an equilibrium which is fixed, because you what you said, an infinite amount of it can be actually at quantity n minus 1 or n plus 1. So there is no equilibrium or stability as far as the market condition. This is depending on people's number and their interest in that sense on the suppliers, because in either the case nobody the quantity constraint is not based on price either. So price is given, therefore the infinite the parallel demand curve and MR curve as well as AR curve will follow. So in that sense AR is equal to MR is equal to P, therefore you cannot actually have any fixed point as an equilibrium. Therefore, once you don't have a fixed point at an equilibrium, then there is no stability, or maybe equilibrium is stable but no quantity keep changing, but price is not. So you have a price stable equilibrium, but you cannot have a quantity stable equilibrium in that sense. So, but the downward sloping and upward sloping demand curve always says or gives us an impression that there is a quantity as well as a price stable equilibrium under perfect competition. This is actually what is a problem as far as this particular setting is concerned. So I this is we need to really understand, and once you have this clarity, then the point is that no, all other assumptions are makes in fact a kind of irrelevant as far as this particular setting is concerned. So normally, as I said, in the T pi is equal to TR minus T, that is profitability is nothing but the difference between the revenue and cost. If that is the case, you don't have actually, you will not have a difference because of the symmetry of information as far as this particular setting is concerned. So once you have a symmetry of information, the relevant information, nobody can bluff on the relevant information. So I will never pay as a buyer a higher price if the price is given which is less than what I expect. Then I'll never give a price because there is no influence I can ever make whatsoever. Same the case with the seller also. When a seller is concerned, as we said in the very beginning, they are price takers, not price makers. In that sense, they cannot have any sort of an influence in that sense. So it is in that sense meaningless to argue that a consumer surplus persists in this particular setup, or a producer surplus, what we largely call it profit, exists in the particular setup. So to maximize profit in this particular case is that your profitability is becomes zero, and many textbook erroneously makes this particular statement that they have a normal profit. I never understand that what is this particular aspect of the normal profit, because the normal profit never exists. Normal profit in the perfect competition setting is in fact zero, because as far as the particular uh, assumptions are concerned and the setup of the market is concerned, the TC is equal to TR in that sense. So that is total cost is going to be equal to total revenue. Their price has been set up. So if that is the case, then the difference of the difference is actually going to be zero in that sense. So if you don't have actually a difference, so once you don't have a difference, and difference of the difference is also going to be is zero. So that is what is actually the beauty of this particular setup. Therefore, there cannot be any profitability under this particular setup. If there is no profitability, then why this? From where does this idea comes as the new normal profit exists? Now, that means there were certain factors may be imputed in the particular setup. So a firm's things or something else is being actually implicitly you are trying to assume. So that is all kinds of the uh, mysterious things which try to be incorporated inside the perfect competition. Never in the perfect competition it all exists, because perfect competition in that sense is an ideal world where see maybe all a large sect of the population is believers. So maybe because of even the economists are not exceptions, because they are also believers, or in their own religious as well as other kind of theistic or atheistic belief. Maybe because of that fact they all believe in this. Once you have this kind of a belief, then why should you need to have really a profitability, because that kind of a profitability never exists as far as this particular market conditions are concerned. Now, what is actually the result of the competition inside of this particular thing? See, the pre and post competitive environment is actually gives you the same result. That is the most upsetting things as far as this particular set. See, once you have a P which is equal to C, MC is equal to MR. So it doesn't mean that whatever quantity you sell, the rate of profit is same. So you may not be actually having a higher profitability in that sense. So whatever your rate of profit will remain as the same. So the same is the case with the consumer also in the same sense. So whether you have 100 unit or 1 unit, you have same utility as far as this particular setup is concerned. So in that sense, it is in that it is a kind of a so-called heavenly atmosphere, where nothing nothing is actually being stored, or something is being basically scarce. So you will get all kinds of this thing. So the price remain same, and the quantity keep changing depending on the interest of the people, but that never affect the very setting of the economic behavior. That is scarcity which is going to be actually the kind of determining fact, because here there is no issue of scarcity at all. So once you don't have this problem of scarcity, then price determination is not also going to be influenced, which is makes this theory so idealistic, and many people say that this is unreal and all. Of course, this is maybe theoretically, maybe empirically unreal, but as a distance in the beginning, I said, you it will give you a kind of a distance from uh, where you are and what is the ideal kind of situation. So if that is the case, you have different kind of again, all the textbooks try to make this particular point that profit is greater than normal. All this normality, all this change in the uh, you know cost curves, etc., is all follows from your three returns. That is, you have an increasing return, you have a decreasing return, and you have a constant return. But as far as the perfect competition setup is concerned, you don't have actually different returns, because you cannot have, because you will have returns if and only if you allow that there is an information asymmetry uh, in the production. Or somebody says that okay, they have, because even for them, if I am actually having a higher advantage, then I will supply all the commodity which is possibly I need to produce. So there is no limit in that sense. Is been you know No firm is been limited in their decision in the theoretical sense. So why should somebody believe that this a whole difference of return has to follow and the price has to follow accordingly? All this is actually in fact makes a different kind of idea you are trying to introduce in this in a particular setting, which is in fact close to all this kind of a differences. So if that is the case, then your TC is not going to be actually an S shape, inverted S shape, or kind of thing. So if that is the case, then you don't in fact have this sort of a profitability effect. This is true with the imperfect competition, but it is not true with the perfect competition at all. But every textbook, why I spend so much time, because almost every textbook is actually spent their whole effort to deal with the perfect competition with this sort of graphical representations. Like they do have, even in the short run never exists in the perfect competition, because time, it is a timeless framework. Whenever you are in equilibrium, whenever you are able to produce, you are inside the market. Whenever you are not, so the only possibility here is that exit and entry. So in between there is no run for any of this firm. So there is another kind of an interesting scenario which you have to keep in mind in the perfect competition. Now, if you are aware as well as you are subscribed to this particular context, then all this normality of profit and the difference between SMC SAV is all basically makes no point, as well as it is all futile. Basically, all that makes the whole understanding of perfect competition a non-perfect competitive environment in that sense. So I spend time because I would like to basically say that all this textbook kind of demonstration of perfect competition is actually meaningless, as well as unreal as far as the theoretical setup of the perfect competition, because where the very fact that we have defined that a TC is equal to the total cost is actually a straight line, and you have definitely an MC is equal to MR, which determines based on a P, which is actually the driver. So the P is a priori set, and the firm has no role to basically influence the price. Given all this condition, then why should a firm has different returns, and how it is possible? And this is in fact a kind of a Pandora box, but there is nothing mysterious inside that particular thing, other than people who are trying to inculcate mystery inside the perfect competitive setup. So the idea of normal profit is actually not normal, it is zero. So normal is profit is necessary. That is what in many textbook people try to say. Necessary for the firms to produce over a long run, and is considered a cost of production. Now, that is, cost of production is completely different to that of the normal profit. Cost of production is the price of the factors, and price of the factor is part of the cost itself. So, if you have organizing, maybe in back of your mind, you've been actually an organizer. No, but organization is an effort. For that, you have to pay a kind of the residue. So once you have this residue being paid, this is what is actually Hart and other people had worked on in the theory of contract and property rights. So a firm gets its profit because it is actually being paid based on the residue, and the firm itself is a residual claimant of the residue in that sense. So, but that itself being treated as a factor reward. Once you treat it as based on this idea, then it is actually meaningless to basically discuss on all the other fact that you have a normal profit, because profit has only one meaning. Profit is the difference between your revenue and cost. So revenue and cost means cost is imputed with all kinds of costs which you involve, like your factor cost and other stuff. So all that is called cost. So the difference between the cost and the revenue is what is called profit. Under perfect competition, it is impossible to have a profit, because your TC must equal to be TR, and there because your price is a priori being set. So you are not, being a firm, you are not actually a larger driver in the inside the market. Therefore it is meaningless basically to again and again go with the same misnomer, or whatever I would call the same error you keep repeating will never make this particular situation a different one, because the very setting itself is actually incoherent for adjusting or coping your different idea. That you can apply in the imperfect competition scenario, where you may be having a monopolistic competition, you may be having a oligopolistic competition, or you may be having even you can apply the same in monopoly, but there are problems in the monopoly also. So I'll come to that in the subsequent lecture. So in profit is greater, normal leads to exit in the long run. Profit is greater, normal leads to entry. So that profit is actually not the determining factor at all. So it is only because you have no different, many economists cannot understand, because they have never been raised into that kind of a setup. Because what is actually the idea of perfect competition is not actually making you inside or outside the firm. It is to tell that how the price is being determined, because so how the price is already given, and how your quantity being determined, whether you play at all a major role, etc., are the different questions. So in that sense, that it makes ideal, otherwise it will never make it ideal. So there are many textbooks who try to say in perfect competition you have a shutdown, where it is quite normal that once you cannot actually maintain the the MCMR relation, then that is actually the MCMR which is equal to P relation, then you are going to exit from the market. So if you cannot actually keep the cost other than to keep the cost in par with the revenue, then you are not fit in the market itself, because the market in the long run will never give you any sort of a hope. Even in the short run, you will never have a hope, because it doesn't have short run or long run understanding in that sense. So it's quite clear from this fact, and all the TF under perfect competition is nonsense in that sense. This has been very eloquently been placed by Asrafa Stafford demonstrated that neither the increasing return to scale nor the decreasing returns to scale are consistent with the assumption of perfect competition, the determination of the supply curve. And he is actually talking about the supply as far as the industry is concerned. So when you go to the demand side, also same thing, because there is a symmetry of information. Then maybe I may be having actually a difference, but the point difference in my utility, but I may take the whole thing if my price, but anyway, no single penny is been reduced, even if I have a higher utility or a lower utility, because the price is a priori given, so I cannot influence price any longer. So I can buy the commodity, that's okay, and the other can also buy, because there are infinite sellers in that sense, or large number of sellers in that sense. So the only assumption which is consistent with perfect competition is the case of constant returns to scale, which however leads to implausible results, as I said earlier. So in 2026 30 papers of Straff, where he concluded that the way of this conundrum is to sidestep perfect competition and adopts its place the notion of monopolistic or imperfect competition. So this is why maybe one of the reason where Edward Chamberlain came up with the monopolistic competition, where you allow this sort of a difference. The moment you try to allow the difference, then you are actually moving away from the very idea of perfect competition. That only creates you a possibility of having a kind of profitability, or in the John Robinson set of imperfect competition, where you have a set of imperfect competitive environment which you can see, which is allow you to basically have a sort of profitability, but not under the perfect competition. During 30s, the monopolistic competition revolution led by Chamberlain and the imperfect competition revolution led by Mrs. Robinson is actually a very one. And of course, in the Chamberlain's things get more attention, but I would say that actually even he had limited only one condition of the market, but Mrs. Robinson had given us enormous opportunities of discussing about different kinds of market, which is in fact had different kinds of profitability, rate of profitability, etc., which creates a kind of sensibility and explanation to why capitalism, why basically profitability at a different rate exists, and certain things are being preferred, certain industries are, so all sort of clarifications as well as discussions can be elaborated from the discussion of Mrs. Robinson and Chamberlain, and of course Chamberlain is a celebrity than Mrs. Robinson in the neoclassical setup. So during the 30s, we had a revolution in microeconomics analysis known as imperfect competition, which was taking place at the same time with the macroeconomic revolution of Keynes. So, seldom in the literature of economics, in fact, talks about this historical understanding of the microeconomic revolution, because that will definitely upset your theoretical understanding. So, but I don't want to go into the details of this thing, but anyway, I will discuss all this thing once you have any kind of question. So I don't basically subscribe into all this kind of different returns under the perfect competition, because return difference is not being permissible under perfect competition by the very fact that its assumption never allows this. Once you have different assumption, then you are basically moving away from the theoretical setup which you yourself had laid on. So then your answer and your theory is actually basically unrelated in that sense. So with this, let me conclude the lecture on perfect competition, and all this short run and long run discussions under this particular aspect is basically trivial for me. All this is actually being given in every textbooks of microeconomics. So I don't think that a perfect competition is something to do with all this thing. So let me conclude with this thing. Thank you so much for your patient listening.